When last we spoke, we were talking about nausea.
Nazir. Yep.
And I was suggesting that there might be two. It seems like from the psukim, from the verses, and also the way the Gemara treats it, that there are primarily two types of nazir. There's one person who's a nazir circumstantially. They've chosen to be a nazir, sort of like somebody else going into rehab, where you're making a dramatic lifestyle choice in order to correct your bearings. So you, like the Rambam suggests in the Shmona Prakim, in his 8 chapters introduction to Pirkei Avos, that sometimes you have a particular character trait, you're all the way to one side, and so you need to, in order to correct your bearings, you might need to go to the other extreme for a little bit, and then with the goal to come back to the middle. So that's, I guess, some of the thinking behind rehab, that a person would take out. They would take some time and then sort of step out from their everyday life into a kind of protected circumstance, get some relief, maybe get their land legs back, and maybe also practice certain skills in a place where they can be nurtured a little bit before they go back into the everyday world. So the goal would be to step out for the purpose of stepping back into some kind of middle path. So that would be one kind of nazir, and that seems to be the most common scenario, at least from the Gemara's discussion of it. And then there would be another nazir who's a nazir for life. This person is not intending to come back into everyday life. They're intending to live this life, which is symbolized by the 3 mitzvos: the staying away from wine, the staying away from contact with the dead, and not cutting their hair. Those 3 are kind of symbolic mitzvahs, but the general theme of their nazirus is a devotion to service of God. And it might be similar to what we saw from the Rambam at the end when we were talking about the Levim. We read that Rambam at the end of the laws of Shemitah V'Yovel, that this was in some ways the design, the plan for Levim, that they would have a life where they could be devoted to the service of God and wouldn't have to be bothered by the pursuits of the everyday world. They could just, those kind of things would be taken care of, and they could just focus on service of God. They would end up, because of that, becoming the teachers of Israel. They would become the members of the Sanhedrin. This would be the Levim and the Kohanim. And then he says, and not just Shevet Levi, but anybody who wants to devote themselves, whose heart feels that they should devote themselves entirely to the service of God, is allowed to do it. So it sounds very much, when you think about a permanent nazir, somebody who is going to be a nazir for life, it sounds like that is the model, that kind of thing of being completely devoted to service of God. Liz is here. Liz is here. There's another section here in our Rambam class. We talked about people who are in a circumstance where they have to deal with impurity, and then once they resolve the impurity, they then have to bring korbanot. So amongst those, there are four types, four peoples who would find themselves in that situation. One of those is a Nazir who became impure through contact with death. So regularly, if somebody came impure through contact with the dead, you would go through the process of restoring purity, which would, you'd wait 7 days. Then during that time, you'd be sprinkled with spring water and the ashes of the red heifer on the 3rd and 7th day. And then after you've had the sprinklings and you go to the mikvah, and then at the end of the 7th day, you are pure. There is no need for sacrifices. But if you're a Nazir and you came in contact with the dead, even if it wasn't your fault, you happened to be in a room and somebody passed away while you're in the room. So now you became impure. So now you have to, not only did you resolve the impurity, but now you have to bring sacrifices on top of that. And so we also talked about the sacrifices that the Nazir brings. And there's a, even here, let's see where we had that. Right, so he brings, so it said here, this was in chapter 6, it said on the 8th day, oh, and also he has to cut his hair and he has to start his count again. If he so this was in chapter 6, verse 9. So it says he has to cut his hair on the 7th day. And then on the 8th day, he brings these offerings. And amongst the offerings that he brings, they are these birds. And one is a sin offering. And the other one is an elevation offering. And then it says he also brings a lamb. It says 1 year old, but I'm pretty sure whenever it says 1 year old, that we mean between 8 days and 1 year old. So he brings a sheep or lamb as a guilt offering.
First year.
First year, it says first year. So I think it's that, yeah. So he brings these offerings, and then there's also, it goes on to say in verse 15 that there's also a basket of matzah and a basket, what they call challah, and also wafers. These are really all matzah. They're really all matzah, but they are, like we've talked about before, when they use the word matzah in the Torah, they don't mean the crispy wafers that we have. They mean flat bread, like a flat bread, a bread that didn't get a chance to rise. Right, so it could be like a laffa or a pita, or even thicker. It could be even thicker. So these are different matzah, challah, so challah and rakik. These are different types of thickness. And so anyways, they are brought, so there's also a bread element to his offering, and their bread, that the matzahs are brought with oil, so there's oil involved in it. So altogether, you've had birds, which are turtle doves or doves. And then you have the lamb, and then you have the bread, and you have oil, and that's it. Nope, that's not it. There's also a ram that is brought with matzah.
The ram becomes a feast.
Right, it is a peace offering as opposed to the other ones. So sin offerings are eaten by the Kohanim in the. Oops, Estelle was trying to get in. Sorry about that, Estelle. So so elevation of sin offerings are eaten by Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash. Sorry about that, Estelle. Sometimes I don't see it right away. I don't know why this particular class requires admission. Like other ones that I do don't require admission. Like the Tuesday night one does and this Thursday one do. Anyways, so so the sin offerings can be eaten by male Kohanim in the courtyard. Elevation offerings are not eaten. Peace offerings, part of them go on the altar, part of them are eaten by the Kohanim, and part of them are eaten by the family that brought them. So, and that is the ram. So that's a peace offering brought with matzah as well. And right, so it says that there is a, just want to see. So it has a libation offering again with it. So the question is, what is, it says niskehem. Niskehem. So it sounds like there's also wine libation also with it. So those are the various elements of the Nazir's offering. And again, amongst them is a sin offering. You could say that the sin offering here is because he became impure, right? Because he's meant to make every effort to make sure that he doesn't become impure. And the fact that he became impure and has to go through this whole process requires a sin offering. There is discussion about the sin offering of a Nazir in the tractate Nazir, that the sin offering is also because he is during this time of Nazirus, he is not drinking wine or any material from the vine of the grape, and so we had a question about grape leaves. If he's allowed to have grape leaves, I don't remember what the story is with grape leaves, but other aspects, the fruit of the vine he's not supposed to have. Because he is abstaining from that, that's considered undesirable. God doesn't want you to abstain from creation. So he is doing this with God's blessing, but it's understood to be, again, here, according to this opinion, it's understood to be undesirable. There is another opinion, and I've mentioned to you before that I once had this conversation with Rabbi Ben-Zion Brook, who of blessed memory, who was the Rosh Hashiva of Navardik. Navardik was a school of radical Musar, of radical personal development, and they employed all sorts of practices that were designed to improve a person's character, and they were, at different times in their history, they were asked to do things that were really difficult to do. Amongst them, he mentioned that when when they were teenagers, they were encouraged to start new branches of the yeshiva in places that did not have a yeshiva. So Navardic grew from like one branch to I think over 100 branches. And then for sure for sure the Holocaust knocked it off. It's possible even before the Holocaust, even that World War One. For some reason, I feel that they were after World War One. That this was between World War One and World War Two. Anyways, so he described what would happen. They would go as teenagers. Sometimes they're like 15 years old, and it would be, let's say, 2 or 3 of them. They would be sent off somewhere. It's possible they were sent to a place across the border in another country, and you'd go to a shul. This was the method. You'd show up at a shul. This would be most likely a small town if it didn't have a yeshiva already. You'd go to the shul, and you'd rely on the generosity of the shul to give you a place to sleep and a place to eat. And then you would tell the gabbai that you're starting a yeshiva. And eventually your goal would be to fundraise and so that the yeshiva would have independent means. But initially you'd start the yeshiva as people sleeping on the benches of the shul and eating in different people's houses. That's how you'd start it. But you do your fundraising and eventually you'd start a place. This is unlike Chabad shluchim who are going to different towns and setting themselves up. There's a whole procedure for how to do this. And there's handbooks and all sorts of really there's handbooks and guides
How
and
to
things.
start a yeshiva.
Right, or how to start a new Chabad house. And also you were sent with the blessing originally, with the blessing of the Rebbe. And that might include funding for a year or two when you first started. But eventually you were expected to go. I remember Rabbi Shmatkin in Milwaukee, the way my parents' friends describe it, I don't know exactly what happened, but my parents' friends described this. So this was in, I think, the late 60s. He came in the late 60s. And he, or maybe, somewhere around there, later 60s. So the way they describe it is, they say he showed up, and 1 week later he was raising money to buy a Chabad house, and he picked this house on the lake. It was a mansion, essentially, a mansion on the lake.
There.
Yeah, it's a great house, and they've used it to great. They had all sorts of stuff that have happened there, and they were like, "You're nuts. There's no way you're going to be able to do this." And 1 week later, he basically had the down payment already for doing it. He hardly spoke English. I think he hardly spoke English. And somehow he was able to get it all going. But that was often how it was done when they did that. Anyways, so these Novardikers would go, and oftentimes, again, they're like 15 years old. They're going to some foreign place, and they would get homesick.
Of course, they're kids.
Right. And the concern was if they got really homesick, then the yeshiva is going to fall apart because these are the guys who are making it happen in the beginning. So I don't know if the Rosh Hashiva encouraged this. I don't remember, or it was just spoken of amongst the boys. I'm pretty sure it was just spoken of amongst the boys. But what they would often do is when they crossed the border, they would tear up their citizenship papers so they could not get back. And he suggested that this was in keeping with the teaching Kedoshim Tiyu, that you shall be holy. So the Ramban, Nachmanides over there says, Kadesh es atzmacha b'muterlach, sanctify yourself with that which is permitted. In other words, do things like these boys. In other words, make resolutions that prohibit something that technically should be permitted in order for growth, for your own personal growth. So this might be, people that have they set up goals for themselves, or certain rules for their daily life that may ask them to be more austere than other people would be. So they're only going to eat, let's say 2 meals a day. They're not going to have 3 meals a day, and it's just going to be a certain basic kind of meal. That's going to be part of and they're going to get up every morning at 4 a.m. and they're going to, they're not going to sleep with a pillow, or I don't know, all these kinds of things, in order that you might see in the kind of regimen of somebody who's looking for a certain style of personal development. So it seems like the Ramban, Nachmanides, is suggesting that he's saying that that's what the Torah is asking you to do in Kedoshim Tiyu. And Ben C and Brooke mentioned this thing that they did, when they crossed the borders. And I asked them afterwards, well, what about this teaching from the Nazir, where we're told the Nazir brings a sin offering because he abstained. Hashem doesn't want you to abstain from the world. So he said, so his answer was, that opinion is one opinion, but there is another opinion. That other opinion is that there is a way that the Torah wants this kind of lifestyle. Obviously, it has to be done, thoughtfully and in a way that actually leads to growth.
Right.
But the other opinion is that the Torah wants this to happen. And again, the way
I have a question about it. If we explain the Nazir as someone who is either thinks he needs a correction addict, or maybe even a Thanksgiving, he wants to do something extra, then I can understand the abstaining. And growing hair probably means that people will know you're a Nazir. I don't know.
Right.
But that now you're subject to Tuma, I don't understand. Do you see? This is like something really physical or something that God is telling you you're doing too. I don't understand fitting in the Tuma with the abstaining, the Musar part. Right.
I think it's a better question than the answer I'm about to give. I think that's one of the important questions to resolve. How does the not becoming impure fit in? But you could say this, that Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch suggests that the reason that there is so much concern about the Kohen becoming impure, why is there more concern about a Kohen becoming impure than anybody else? Why are they not allowed? Other people are like an average Jew. There's no prohibition against an average Jew becoming impure. If the average Jew is impure, they cannot engage in, they can't eat sacrificial food, they can't eat truma, they can't go into the courtyard, they can't go into the Beit HaMikdash. But there's no prohibition. There's no prohibition. Why is it with a Kohen there's a prohibition against them becoming impure? Just say the same thing practically. If they do become impure, they're not going to be able to work. But why is there a prohibition against them becoming impure? And why is there seems to be like extra concern? There seems to be certain things. The Kohen Gadol, what do we say about? All right. I'm not going to say this part because I'm not sure about it. But anyways, why is there such an extra emphasis on it? So he wanted to suggest it's partly because the Kohanim represent service of God. And since they are symbols of the service of God, we want to make it clear that we think about the service of God differently than other cultures around the world. Other people, when they talk about serving God or gods, their belief is that somehow, and especially this was true in Egypt, the belief was that it's really only possible after you die, that this world isn't a place that really allows for service of God, that it's only in the netherworld, in the afterworld, that you're going to have a chance to really commune with the spiritual. And this was apparently commonly held, not just in Egypt, but in other places as well. And the Torah stands in opposition to that, that the Torah suggests that service of God is available fully in this life, and that a person can reach a full and robust service of God while they're alive in a physical world. And in order to emphasize that, the Kohanim are meant to be distanced from death and the trappings of death. So there's no sign of mourning. There's not supposed to be any sign of mourning on Kohanim. If they're in contact with the dead, if they're tamei, they have to be as far away from the service of God as you can see. Not because intrinsically, when you're tamei, you're somehow technically far from God, but just because they want to emphasize that service of God is available in this life, in a robust life. So it could be that it's a similar kind of thing with the Nazir, that once the Nazir decides to be a symbol of service of God, then they also have to be distanced from contact with the dead, because now people are looking at them, and we want to make it clear through them, just like with the Kohanim, that they're not, that service of God is robustly available even in everyday life. So that is a possible answer to that question.
That's good. That's good.
Okay. Right. All righty. So that's our Nazir. And now we move on to Birkas Kohanim. So, Liz, do you want to read this? It's not long. It's in chapter 6. It's starting with 22, and it's only going to be through 27.
Hopefully I can read that far.
I'm
Are there
I
any
believe
big
in you.
Any big words?
I believe in you. There might be one or two. I believe in
Hashem
you.
spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, so shall you bless the children of Israel, saying to them, may Hashem bless you and safeguard you. May Hashem illuminate his countenance for you and be gracious to you. May Hashem lift his countenance to enable." Wait.
You got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm all right. I thought I was on the wrong page.
No.
Countenance to you and establish peace for you. Let them place my name upon the children of Israel, and I shall bless them.
Okay. So the word blessing appears here a few times. So it is mentioned in verse 23. So shall you bless the people of Israel. And then in 24, may God bless you and keep you. And in verse 27, I will bless them. If you notice at Birkat Kohanim, if you notice Birkat Kohanim in the synagogue, the way they do it is the Shliach Tzibur, the Chazan, says the blessing word for word, and they repeat the word after the Chazan says it. So what happens is they go up onto they call it the Duchen, like they go up to a raised platform. They've taken off their shoes, just like Kohanim in the Beis Hamikdash. They've had their hands washed. They do not wash their feet. Why do they not wash their feet? It's a matter that deserves discussion. But they do not wash their feet, but they do go up without shoes on, not barefoot, but without shoes on. And they go onto a raised platform. There's usually a carpet that was put up on that raised platform. And they go up at the Ritzei prayer, which starts the topic of the service, the service that was done in the Beit HaMikdash, in the Amidah. And then after the Modim, after the blessing of Modim, we have Birkas Kohanim. So they say, they're called out, the Chazan says Kohanim, and then they say a blessing. So they actually say a blessing on the blessing. They are about to give a blessing, which is a mitzvah. So therefore they say the blessing you say before a mitzvah. So they say that blessing. And then the Chazan says each word. So he says Yivarechecha, and then they say Yivarechecha. He says Hashem, they say Hashem. He says Yishmerecha, they say Yishmerecha, and then everybody says Amen. That's the end of the first blessing. There's 3 blessings here, 3 words, 5 words, and then 7 words. And then he does it again. He says the first word and when you read explanations of why that is, the explanations typically are that we want to make it clear that the Kohanim are not the reason for the blessing, and they're not the source of the blessing. The Kohanim function as a conduit. They are like a conduit. They're a channel. The blessing comes from God, and it comes to the people. The reason for this blessing is the people, and it's the people's blessing, as it were. And God is providing it. The Kohanim are themselves a channel for the blessing. So that's why it says, I want you to bless Israel. I want you to bless Israel. So the blessing is for Israel, but then it says at the end, Va'ani avarchem, I will bless them. That's what God says at the end of 27. So the emphasis is that the blessing is coming from God, and it's happening because the Jewish people deserve to be blessed. So it diminishes the Kohanes or it puts a Kohen in their place. We are meant to treat Kohanim with respect, and they get a lot. They get a lot of respect. They get first dibs on most things. They get the first aliyah. We are meant to treat them with veneration and respect. And in society, they were considered a kind of favored class. I don't know how it was throughout all of history, but there were definitely periods of history where marrying into a Kohen's family was like marrying into aristocracy. There were essentially 2 types of aristocracy. There was the king's family, and there were the Kohen's families. And so marrying into Kohanim was considered a
moving up.
Yeah, and it was reflected even in ketubot, in the ketubas that were written. They tended to be for more money when you married into Kohanim families, and there were other benefits. You got to eat truma. If it's a woman marrying into a Kohen family, she got to eat truma. But even their daughters, the daughters of Kohanim, were considered to be a great catch, even for a non-Kohen to marry a daughter of a Kohen, even though they're not going to be able to eat truma afterwards. But still, they're considered a kind of aristocracy. So they got a lot of status. They had status, and they were shown deference and honor. And so every once in a while, they are put in their place, just reminded that when it comes down to it, this is about a relationship between God and the Jewish people, and they are a conduit in a relationship between God and the Jewish people. We talked about this back when we were talking about the blemishes, that if a Kohen had a particular blemish, they weren't able to serve in the Beit HaMikdash. and Rabbi Tursky's beautiful explanation, Shlita, where he said that, of course, the fact that a Kohen has a physical challenge or physical deformity, it's not the Kohen's fault, and God knows that. And certainly he's not judged. His value is not determined by what he looks like. But it happens to be that the Kohen is expected to be a conduit between God and the Jewish people. And as a conduit, we want him to be as invisible as possible. Just like when you think of the service class, if you're watching Upstairs, Downstairs, or Downton Abbey, and you're talking about the service class, we're seeing the service class are meant to, to do their work, but
blend into the background.
yeah, they're not supposed to be seen. They're not supposed to be heard. It's not about them. If they call attention to themselves, that's not good.
Right.
And even if they did something nice, it's inappropriate for them to call attention to themselves. This is not about them. This is about the lords of the manor and their guests. This is not about the service class. And the Kohanim are a similar service class. They are there to service the relationship between God and the Jewish people. Rabbi Foreman, at the beginning, in one of his lecture series, he asked the question, what genre would you put the Bible? Like he makes this point that Mortimer Adler and some other gentlemen who I don't remember their names, but they wrote a book. Mortimer Adler was involved when he was at University of Chicago, he was involved in setting up the curriculum of the great books. And so it's in something to do with that. They wrote a book about literature, and he made the point, it's very important to know what genre you're studying, because if something is meant to be comedy, and you could get offended by it, as many people do, that like nowadays people who get offended by comedy, and there are comedians will be saying, this is comedy, right? This is comedy. This is what comedy is supposed to be. But there are people who get offended by it and find difficulty distinguishing between what, comedy and drama or serious news. Like when Jon Stewart had to remind people, this is a comedy show. I know people think they're getting their news from here, but this is a comedy show. Right. So knowing your genre is very important. So he said, what genre would you put the Bible in? So he said a lot of people would probably put the Bible in theology. So imagine somebody who's never studied the Bible before. And let's say you take the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama, when he first meets Jews and Christians, and he finds out there's a Bible. He hasn't looked at the Bible yet, but he finds out there's a Bible. Now, he's grown up in a society that doesn't have anything like that.
Right.
Right. They don't have a notion of a personal God or creation or anything like that. So now he hears about it. But he's a very intelligent man and spiritually very knowledgeable. He's going to be all sorts of excited because why? He wants to learn about this personal God. They believe in a personal God. He wants to learn about his nature. He wants to learn everything he can about this personal God. He would find himself extremely frustrated by reading the Bible because it has very little information in it about it. It's not a book. Almost every topic of theology that you could think of is not addressed in the Bible. The Bible, he wanted to suggest, is more a book about the relationship between God and humans and his expectations for humans. It's not a book. So he was saying, like, is it a book of theology? Like, what would you think? Right. So if you think about the Torah as a book about the relationship between God and humans, and his expectations for humans, then when you get to the middle the Torah. So you are now talking about, I mean, it's obviously the sacrificial route to a relationship, but it's not just going to be, as we saw when we were studying the book of Vayikra, it was also about relationship, his expectation for relationship between us and other people, our relationship with him, and part of it is the sacrificial relationship between us and him. But it's about God and people. It's not God, the Kohanim, and the people. It's God and the people. The Kohanim are meant to facilitate that, but they're not supposed. It's not supposed to be about. It's not supposed to be about them. So this is that. This is emphasized here at the end. I will bless them. I will bless them. This, you're going to do it this way, but the bracha is coming from me. Bracha comes from me. It doesn't come from the Kohanim. The Kohanim are not an independent source of spirituality. They are a conduit. This is where a lot of leaders get into trouble. Not just Kohanim, even like Moshe. Even Moshe. Moshe at the striking of the rock. If you ask yourself, what is the problem with Moshe? He gets upset. He smacks the rock instead of speaking to it. But it, in a sense, what it looks like is Moshe made the water come out, not God. Why does it matter that he veered from what God said? Why does that matter? He struck it instead of speaking to it. It's because if you watch that scenario, it would look to you like Moshe brought that water, not God. Moshe's upset. Oh, you want water? I'll give you water, right? You are, and then he smacks it, and then water comes out. That's the problem. He's not supposed to be making it look like he is the source of stuff. He is supposed to be a conduit. When he starts making it look like he's in charge, and that's when you lose your job. You lose your job over that. Because this is true with all Jewish leadership, and it's especially true about Kohanim, that their position is they sort of live their position in as much as they function as a conduit for Hashem. If it looks like it's all about them, then it's over.
Yeah.
Right. Which is one of the, it's one of the real challenges in a Hasidic movement. It's also a challenge in the sort of yeshivish world when you have a great rabbinic figure, but especially in the Hasidic world, where you have a Rebbe. It's one of the challenges to remember that this is about God. I even joke with some of my Chabad friends about this, every once in a while. It was God that did that commandment, because you can get lost in and understandably that you can get lost in the wonder of this person, and you can forget that it's about God. So this is an important feature of this thing about the Kohanim, that they are a conduit and a channel. A pipeline for this. There is discussion in the Gemara. We had it, I think we had it in Nazir even, it came up, where the Gemara asks, who are the Kohanim the agents for? Are they representatives of the Jewish people in our relationship with God, or are they representatives of God in his relationship with us? And you could see it both ways. There are times when it certainly seems to be that they are functioning as our agents in our relationship with God. But there do seem to be times when they seem to be functioning as God's agent in his relationship with us. We could see it sort of either way. But ultimately, again, they're supposed to be conduits. All right. So this is a bracha. We have talked about bracha before, but it's important to remember what we mean when we say bracha. So the word itself, there are different suggestions for the etymology for bracha. My favorite is the Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo Ben Aderet, who's writing in the late 1200s. He was the great Spanish scholar. After Nachmanides leaves Spain to go to Israel, the Rashba becomes the great leader of Spanish Jewry. And at that time, Spanish Jewry were extremely influential in the world. So there's a series of responsa of his. He wrote a very important commentary on the Talmud. He's extremely influential. So he suggested that the root of bracha is brecha. Brecha means like a pool or a spring, and the imagery is a pool or a spring of water that would then be directed towards seeds and allow for those seeds to fully reach their potential. So let's say you have seeds planted in the ground, but it's dry earth. Those seeds carry the potential for, a luxurious crop, but it's not going to achieve its potential unless it gets this energy. The water is that energy, and it allows the seeds to reach their fruition. There's the potential. In other words, in this model, let's say it's cotton. Let's say you're in Egypt and it's cotton. So all that cotton information is in the seed. The water is this energy. When applied to the seed is able to reach its fruition. There's no cotton in the water. There's nothing in the water that is the cotton. That's their
food.
Right. So and this is similarly how we understand blessing. Blessing is divine energy. That when it's available divine energy, it's available to the human being to channel it in a particular direction. And when you channel it in that direction, the seeds that are planted in every human being, those seeds can grow to fruition. So an example of being blessed would be that you have lots of something. You have lots of something. So we would say you are blessed, because that's an indication that your potential is like fully being realized when you see a lot of something. So for instance, when Yitzchak planted, he planted crops when he was living amongst the Philistines. Just go there for 1 second. So this is at the end of, this is, there we go. It's in chapter 26. And this is verse 12. This is right after
In here?
Avimelech. This is in Genesis, in Bereshit 26, verse 12. This is right after Avimelech sees that Rivka is really Yitzchak's wife and gets upset with Yitzchak, and they have the whole thing. So then it says, and Yitzchak sowed the land and reaped 100-fold the same year. That word mea she'arim comes from here, 100-fold. And then it finishes, Vayivarchehu Hashem. God blessed him. That's like a symbol of blessing. That he had lots. He had lots.
Yep.
So when we think of blessing, when we say somebody is blessed, typically that's what we mean. they have a lot of what we think people would want
Or would need.
or need. A lot of what people would want or need. So this could be, it could be when it comes to crops, something like crops. It could be if they're they own a restaurant. It could be that they have lots of branches of the restaurant
And lots of customers.
and lots of customers and things like that. So we tend to think of it as in lots. In fact, it is suggested that the word bracha is made up of bet, which means 2, resh, which means 200, and a chaf, which is 20. So it's all the 2s. And the idea is 2 is 1, you have 1, and then you have 2. 2 is the beginning of more.
Right.
So this idea that there's some kind of divine energy that is being channeled in a particular direction, and the goal of that is blessing. That that the person should be blessed. So blessed would mean that they're getting a fullness.
Yeah.
A fullness. Now the actual blessings here. The subject is in 24, God should bless you and protect you. God should shine the light of his face to you and show you grace or gratitude. And God should lift up his face to you and give you peace. So peace is going to be a result of blessing. Grace is going to be a result of blessing. Grace, chen, is, it became a Yiddish word. Chen became like a Yiddish word, but it means, the idea is you're likable. If you say a person has chen, it means you're likable. Likable is not anything to do with what you deserve. It's just, if people like you, in fact, right, and if people like you, if you're the kind of person that people like, so they favor you. If you're liked, you're shown favor. That favor is not earned. You're not getting it because you're good. You're getting it because you're liked.
Right.
You're not getting it because of anything you did before. You're just getting it because you're liked. That's typically how it's explained. That's what Moshe Shapiro of blessed memory used to suggest. Now, when it says chen, it means when Hashem says, because matzah chen beinai, God, Moshe says to God after the golden calf, he says the people don't want you. God is saying, I'm going to use an intermediary. There's going to be an angel that's going to take care of you guys from now on. And the people go, they don't want it. And Moshe, says to God, please don't do that. And he says, I'm going to do it for you because I like you. That's essentially what God said. Not because you deserve this. You haven't done it, you didn't deserve it. But all right, you have found favor in my eye. You have found favor. So this notion of chen, so this is a thing of blessing. A thing of a blessing, an indication of blessing is that you even have stuff that you didn't earn. Like whenever I ask Hashem for something, if I personally ask Hashem for something, so I'll ask for what I need, and then I'll ask for a little bit more, even what I don't need. I'll always add that on. I like for what I need, and even what I don't need, because and that there's precedent for that here, because Hashem, and part of blessing is he's going to do it for you like out of chen because he likes you. There's also the that first one of the Yishmerecha, let him bless you and guard you or keep you. That seems to be an add-on. In other words, you're going to get blessing, but also I'm going to make sure you're protected, because when you get blessing, that attracts the attention of thieves. Now, there are actual thieves, there are emotional thieves.
Oh, yeah.
There are all different kinds of thieves. But when somebody is blessed, it gets the attention of others, and it can be their downfall. When somebody wins the lottery, they will talk about that initial crush suddenly of friends and family. There was somebody
people you didn't know.
Right. this guy, I have a friend, a schoolmate named Dan Bader, who lives in Milwaukee. About 30 something years ago, his family, he was raised in a wealthy family, but it was a wealthy family that didn't like overspend. Like they were very, so he
They
didn't
were
grow up.
frugal.
Yeah, he grew up in a nice house in a nice area, but he was not pampered. There was nothing about his life that was pampered. Then his mother passed away, and she left a massive, massive fortune. Just the mother left like $100 million.
Oh,
And a lot of it went to a foundation, but it also went to each of the kids. So he became the director of this foundation that had like $100 million in it. And suddenly every person in Milwaukee, wanted to meet him because he has this foundation. And he said, so he told me that like he would meet with somebody and there would be somebody else there. And the guy would go, Dan, you remember your third grade swimming instructor, Bob? Now this guy actually brought Bob, who had taught him swimming when he was in third grade, in order to curry favor with him as they were attempting to work with the foundation. So when you think about, let's say, the Beatles or groups like that, with the crazed attention they get, and then how it starts to weigh on them. It starts to weigh on you, and the like it could feel like they're sucking the blessing out of you, sucking the energy. Right. So that one, it seems like it's saying, God, the first bracha is Hashem should give you a bracha, and then it should be protected. That's like step one. It should be protected. Then it seems like step two, you're going to even get more. In other words, this bracha is not just going to be what you deserve, but you're even going to get more. And then finally, and it sounds like that this is like the end of all brachas, or the bracha of all brachos is peace. We'll have to talk about that next time, because we've been talking about blessing being many. So in what manner is peace blessing? Why is that called blessing? And why would that be the best of blessing? So we will get to there and talk about that. Certainly we think of it, but why does it fit the category of blessing? We think of it as something good, but why does it fit the category of blessing? All right. I am grateful that we had this opportunity together.
Me too.
I look forward to doing this again. And
Yes,
Lois
Thank you. Thank you,
is
guys.
in her car. She
Oh,
wasn't.
there's my Band-Aid. I just came out.
Lois is in her car. You should get, can people sign it, Lois?
Oh, that's a good idea. All right.
You have
You
to
should
print small.
sign it.
No, the bandage is too little. Her other one was.
No, the one on her forehead.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's big.
I think it's okay. You just give them the,
Big one
you
in
have to
there?
have the micro calligraphy kind of.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can see it. Okay, thank
Okay.
you. Good Shabbos.
you, Rabbi.
Good Shabbos.
Good
Bye-bye.
Shabbos,
Shabbos,
good Shabbos,
everyone.
Michelle. Be well,
Good
be well,
Shabbos.
be well. Bye-bye.
Be well.
Good Shabbos.
Are you in a